guys, it's Miss Hayes, and today I'm coming to you from my kitchen. Okay, so I was at home and I was sitting here thinking that we need to go over the scientific method again. And I thought the best way to go over the scientific method would be to actually do the scientific method with you guys. So, here's the thing about science, is it is everywhere. And really, science is all about curiosity and questioning. So, you can come up with a scientific question anywhere. And to prove that, I'm going to come up with one of the most simple questions that I could find in my kitchen. So my question is going to be, does one type of butter melt faster than the other? And I'm going to do Country Crock versus Blue Bonnet. So first off, I need to gather my supplies. So I have my Country Crock butter, and then I also have some Blue Bonnet butter. But before we start the experiment, we need to go over some of the key points of an experiment. So every science experiment contains factors that are called variables. These are things that can be changed. A controlled experiment works with one variable at a time. If several variables are changed at the same time, the scientists would not know which variable is responsible for the observed results. An independent variable is the variable that is changed or controlled in an experiment. If it is graphed, it will be on the x-axis. The dependent variable is the variable that is being tested or measured. It depends on another variable. It would be on the y-axis if it was graphed. Every experiment needs to be controlled. The variables that are constant or unchanged in an experiment are considered to be controls. So now we have to look at our experiment. If we are melting butter on the stovetop, what would be our independent variable? Well, that would be our type of butter. That would be the Blue Bonnet butter and the Country Crock. Our dependent variables would be the time it takes to melt, because this dependent variable depends on the type of butter. The time it takes to melt depends on the type of butter. Our constants, which would be the things that we keep the same or unchanged, would be the temperature of the stovetop, the pan, the eye of the stove, and the amount of butter. So let's talk about why these things would be our constants. The temperature would be a constant because if we put one butter at a different temperature than the other, then one may melt faster than the other. If we use a different pan, then one pan may be more capable of melting the butter quicker than the other. We also need to use the same eye of the stove because some eyes are more capable of producing more heat. We also need to use the same amount of butter. If we used more butter of one type than the other, then it might take longer for that type of butter to melt. So now we are on step 2 of the scientific method. Our first step was to ask a question. Now we need to form a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a possible explanation to the question or problem. It is simply a prediction and has not yet been proven or disproven. My hypothesis for this experiment is the Country Crock butter will melt faster than the Blue Bonnet butter. So now I'm back in my kitchen and I am heating up my pan, and I'm going to use the same pan on the same eye at the same temperature. Those are all of my controls. I'm also going to use the spoon at the left to get 1 tablespoon out of each type of butter. While performing experiments, it is always very important to record your data. So, after I had melted each type of butter, I wrote down how long it took for each one to melt. It took Country Crock approximately 65 seconds to melt, and Blue Bonnet approximately 55 seconds to melt. Once you have recorded your data, then it is time to analyze your data. So, in this case, I made a bar graph. A bar graph is used to compare. As I mentioned earlier, the independent variable will be on the x-axis. In our case, it is the type of butter. The dependent variable will be on the y-axis. In this case, it is the time it took to melt. When we analyze our data on a graph, we can clearly see that the Blue Bonnet butter melted quicker than the Country Crock. Once you have come to a clear conclusion, it's important to write it down. So, our conclusion would be that Blue Bonnet butter melts faster than Country Crock butter under these circumstances. The hypothesis that we had was disproven. Now we have went through the 6 steps of the scientific method. First, we asked our question, which was, which type of butter will melt quicker? Our hypothesis was the second step. This is when we said that the Country Crock butter would melt faster than the Blue Bonnet butter. We then tested our experiment by melting both butters at the same conditions on the same stovetop at the same temperature and in the same pan, and also with the same amount of butter. We then recorded our data and analyzed it by using a bar graph. In conclusion, we were able to report that the Blue Bonnet butter melted faster than the Country Crock butter. So guys, we successfully completed the scientific method. I hope now that you're able to see that it's really not long or hard or even confusing. So if you're a curious person, get out there, ask your own questions. You're going to be a great scientist. So, I hope to hear from you soon. I hope this video helped, and please stay safe and healthy.